Yes, I have seen the 2 other girls in their dresses walking up and down the drag. No, my husband is not here, nor is my photographer. Yes, I am sitting at the end of a bar in Niagara at noon because everything is going according to plan, exactly like I envisioned it. No offense. It's just weird. It's like when I take off my dress, I'll be a whole new person. Or at least I'll be living an entirely new life. I already can't go back to the old one. They must know by now that I've run away. And if I were to show back up an hour into the reception, then what? What would that even look like? It would only be the worst of both worlds. And I don't want to go back anyways. But it's just like for 25 years, I've lived in this bubble. And all of my friends and family are in that bubble. And right now, that bubble is around a church in the Finger Lakes, and I'm all the way up here, but I'm still in the bubble, stretching the soapy film, and I can see all of you around me and the green grass on the TVs up there, but I'm still breathing the air in my bubble. And all I can feel is the tension of that film stretched way beyond its limit and trying to pull me back in. I'm just waiting for it to pop so I can taste the air around me. It already smells fresher than what we're used to in the city. I don't think he cheated on me. I don't think he would. He loved me. Or still does, I presume, at least for a few more hours. Let's just say he wasn't exactly bringing home a different girl every weekend before we met is all. I think somewhere deep down he always considered our relationship something of a charitable act on my part. Well, that was on the good days. Other times, when we fought, he'd say that I was settling for a boring, tame schlub that I could control, and that I'd already had my fun, and now that I'd been burned by all the men I was actually attracted to, it was his turn. Then, why do you let yourself be controlled, I'd say. Why do you have to control me, he'd shout. And it's just like, I don't, but you so clearly seem to think I do, so... I really did love him, though. I mean, clearly. But I think if I listen to the part of me that wants to give in and drive back, I'll end up driving into the river instead. It'll only take one moment of clarity behind the wheel, and I'll do whatever rash thing to stop myself. So, maybe it's better I stay here, and you can order me another drink. I've never told anyone this before. I've spent a year trying to suppress it, and all it did was make it so that I could never think about anything else for more than a few minutes when I was around him. So, maybe if I just tell it to someone, then I can leave it behind me, along with everything else in the bubble. It was a fall day, like this, sunny, a little chilly. We were in Cleveland for a wedding of 2 old college friends of his. Our flight arrived pretty early, so we drove the rental to campus to kill a few hours. It was homecoming weekend, so there were tents and tables set up and people walking everywhere. We got a coffee and walked around beneath the trees, and it seemed like every landmark we passed spawned a whole new stream of reminiscing. Fraternity Row, so stately yet trashy, where he'd had his first beer, a natural ice that someone had punctured and shoved in his face. Murphy Hall, his favorite building on campus, and the walks to morning classes there with Dr. Dalbrook and Dr. Silverstein. The Painted Rock, where his friend Tommy tripped sophomore year walking home from the bar and needed stitches. It was painted up for some charity drive while we were there. Sometimes the news stories complimented whatever story he was telling. Other times he'd bounce off in some wild tangent midway through another sentence. It was kind of cute. He'd get so deep into the memories that sometimes I think he forgot I was even there. I pointed out that he had now been out of school for longer than he'd been in it. He smiled, but I think it put a little bit of a damper on his day. The wedding was beautiful. We were seated at a table with a bunch of his old college friends, and seeing him interact with them was like watching a whole new person. I mean, he appeared on all accounts to be the same guy, but it was like I'd been looking at the outside of a flower all along, and then all of a sudden it had blossomed, and I was getting to see all of the folds and layers inside. They all seemed like really nice people. I'd never really met many of his friends before. I don't think he had very many where we lived, to be honest with you. But it was like, when I said I would marry him, I loved him. And of course, I really did want to marry him. And I guess I thought I would start picturing a future with him soon, like if I kept going through the motions. Or there were some days where I really thought I was overthinking it all, and that I had been picturing a future with him all along from the start. But the truth is, I really wasn't until that wedding. And all of the sudden, while I was sitting there looking at him, I could see it all. The house, waking up the kids for school, the fights, the vacations, the in-law holidays. And all of a sudden, it didn't seem like a thing to do, like a step to check off a list. All of a sudden, it was a reality I could step into. After the reception, most of us ended back on campus, roving around the quad, laughing and telling stories, jumping around to all of their favorite bars. Slowly but surely, the gang started to break apart. "We're old now," they kept saying to each other as they stumbled back to their hotels and hugged and kissed goodbye. Eventually, it was just us again, and we walked to his old house. It was painted this really striking deep blue with white trim. He said it was so strong that the side of the neighboring houses facing it glowed blue when the sun was out. Matt said that around campus, it was just known as the Blue House, and that it was actually split into two by the owner a few years before he moved in, right down the middle, so that even the stairs were half as wide as they should have been. Nobody called it the Blue Houses, but she collected twice the rent. It was funny to think about walking up the same set of stairs as someone side by side and having no idea. There were maybe a dozen people and a fire and music and a grill going in the backyard when we walked up and while we were standing on the sidewalk. And Matt was telling me about what types of pizzas and sides he liked to order from the various pizza shops in town and on what nights of the weeks, studying for this class or that lab. Someone sitting in a plastic lawn chair by the fire drinking a beer called out his full name. "Is that you?" he said. He was wearing a hockey sweater and big shiny sunglasses and a new baseball hat sitting, like on top of his head. Not really on, if that makes sense. He stood and came over. Matt, for his part, seemed more than a little confused. "Reed Mahoney," said the guy, and shook Matt's hand over a little chain link fence. "Garth's little brother. We met when I visited him for Halloween my senior year of high school." Matt was like, right. And I couldn't really tell if he knew the kid or was pretending to. "This was actually my house during my junior year," he said. "Dude, I know," said the kid. "Isn't that funny?" "Keeping it in good hands," said Matt. "Which one was your room?" Matt pointed up at the second story. "Corner room?" Matt nodded. "Dude, Yoshi," he called to someone sitting by the fire. "He used to have your room." The guy had tribal tattoos all up and down his arm. He gave the rock on sign. "Hell yeah, man, sick spot. That morning sun is pretty brutal though, huh?" Matt squinted up at the window. "That tree was a lot taller when I was here," he said. "Yoshi hates it," said Reed. "He says the attic door freaks him out so bad he can't sleep." That made Matt smile. "Really?" Yoshi was laughing kind of sheepishly, going, Nah. It is kind of freaky, though," he said. "Yeah," said Matt. "Definitely." He introduced me then, his fiancée, and said he was showing me around. "Want to show her your old digs?" asked Reed. Matt looked at me. We all looked at Yoshi. Yoshi shrugged. I was a little curious to see the freaky attic everyone was talking about. "Door should be open," he said. "Good seeing you, man," said Reed. And they shook hands again. I waved to them all and followed Matt in the back door to the kitchen. The linoleum tile was a bit sticky. There were empty beer cases stuck between the wall and the kitchen table and a framed Cabs poster next to the fridge, to give you a picture. But I'd certainly seen worse, when it came to houses full of college boys or girls, for that matter. I asked Matt if it felt strange, and he said that it did. A little. I actually bought this air conditioner, he said, pointing to the one in the living room window. He led me up a claustrophobic staircase and down a short hallway to a bedroom painted the same blue as the outside. Yoshi was actually a pretty conscientious guy, apparently, and his room was a lot cleaner than the rest of the house, which was nice. Didn't smell too bad either, to tell you the truth. Matt stood in the doorway a minute, taking it in. Boy, he said, can't believe how long it's been. Feels like I moved out a month ago. I asked to see the attic door. I'll do you one better, he said. How about I show you the spooky attic? I remember that Yoshi had a really cool-looking synthesizer set up in the corner of the room. The attic door was right by the head of the bed, which seemed like one of the worst places for it to be, I thought, so that if you slept on your side, you'd fall asleep looking at it. But otherwise, it just looked like a normal wooden door. I pointed out that there was a lock on the outside, and Matt thought about it for a second and said that he'd never stopped to consider how odd that was. We struggled to come up with any explanation at all besides the unspoken. Former owners kept their deformed child, object of their shame, in the attic for 16 years and fed it rats and table scraps. I said I would just lay there all night waiting to see that door handle turn. Matt chuckled and said, yeah, once or twice maybe. I said, hadn't he heard of people getting into other people's attics and basements and walls and living there for months, for years? He said, sure, but there was only one way up there, and it was through his bedroom. I told him raccoons and stuff will chew holes into places like that to get in for the winter. He seemed like he never considered that. He opened the door, and a blast of stale, hot air hit us right in the face. There were some shelves behind it on the right, with a few boxes of old papers and some Christmas decorations on the stairs to the left. They were also half as wide as you would expect them to be, and kind of steep, actually. The air got hotter and staler the higher we went up, and at the top of the stairs, we were under the apex of the A-frame, and only had to duck a little, but to move anywhere else, you had to duck quite a bit. Wow, they really cleaned this place up since I left, he said. He said that for a while before he moved in, the Blue House had been something of a party house on campus. When he moved in, there were little notes and cartoons drawn in Sharpie all over the ceiling. And there was a bare light bulb hung along the right-hand wall and a string of big colored Christmas lights running along one of the support beams. He sat down and gestured for me to join him. I said it was hard to breathe. He said it was unbearable in the summers and freezing in the winter. I said it was still a pretty neat little spot, though. And he agreed. I almost feel dizzy being back here, he said. I said it might just be the heat. It's a lot of memories, he said. Up here? I asked. He shrugged. A couple. I thought I could see the petrified remnants of a bird's nest up in a little nook where the wall met the ceiling. I said, I bet you brought all your little girlfriends up here, huh? He laughed and said something like that. Then he asked if I had any coins in my purse. I did. He was scanning the ceiling and started scratching away little chips of the paint until he found what he was looking for. He listened for a second to make sure nobody was coming, and then he started scratching away at a whole section. Matt Cole Everett, 2013. I asked if those were his roommates. Cole had the room by the stairs. Everett lived in a dorm. Maybe it was something about the way he had unearthed it like that, like an archaeologist. It made me want to reach out and touch it. The same place he'd been touching 5 years ago. I wish I could have known you back then, I said. I don't know about that, he said. I want to know all of you, I said. I want to know what you were like when you were 5, when you were in school. I feel like I just want to absorb all of you into me, like you see 2 cells combined under a microscope. I was pretty weird back then, he said. I said back then. He tells me that he had a magic phase, an extended magic phase, I think he may have said. I said, like the cards? Because my brother played those, so I knew all about them, and sure, my brother is weird. But he said, like with a K. I didn't know what that meant. He said, all three of us became sort of obsessed with Aleister Crowley for like a semester and a half. Then he made his voice a little quieter and said, we used to do our rituals up here. I said, rituals? And he nodded without looking at me, like he was watching them replay in his mind. I can't believe I'm telling you this, he said. I said it was a little dorky, sure, but that I thought it was cute. Maybe I thought I could will it to be so. Of course, in all honesty, it definitely made me feel at least a little bit weird, but hey, I asked for it. He said to wait there, and he went back down the stairs into the bedroom. I didn't hear what he was doing down there, maybe just listening to hear if anyone else was in the house. A few seconds later, I heard him close the attic door, and then the lights went out. I could hear his feet coming up the stairs. The only light to see by came from the street lights through a grated vent up beneath the point of the A. Can I tell you something that I've never told anyone before, he said. My eyes were still adjusting. Maybe I'm crazy or misremembering, but in the dark, something in his voice sounded different. I said, of course. He sat down and began running his hand over the floorboards. He said that there was something I had to understand about Everett first, or a lot of things he guessed, but that he was a year younger than he and Cole, and he didn't have many other friends besides them, at least at school. But that almost everyone on campus knew him, or at least knew of him, or had seen him. He was a short guy with glasses and frazzled hair who wore his bathrobe everywhere and walked around with his head down, mumbling to himself. Yeah, look, he said. He showed me little circles on the ground where the woods seemed just a half shade lighter. It could have been a trick of the light, even, I don't know. See that? He pointed his finger to 5 spots around a rough circle. That's where we had the candles. You don't understand. Some of these rituals went on for months. I was honestly extremely lucky that I even graduated on time. Everett was in the music program, I was told, easily the most prestigious college within the university, composition major. Matt said that everyone else treated him like a mascot or a pet or something, but that surprisingly of all of them, he was far and away the most into all the occult stuff. And they were all into it. But he was the one making a lot of the big suggestions. It was his lead, and his whims they tended to follow. So that's just to say, you know, if and when he ended up tied to the floor like the Vitruvian Man, it was probably his idea, I guess. He got quiet again before telling me the next part. Listening, we could still hear the party going on outside. It didn't sound like there was anyone in the house. I held his hands in mine. He said, we'd been up for probably at least 72 hours at this point, like straight. We'd been going at this for a few weeks and it was spring break, so we planned it to culminate when nobody else would really be around. I hadn't gone to class for like 2 weeks anyways, so it hardly made a difference to me. Seriously, we were out of our minds at that time, kind of, but that was kind of the point. He kept saying, even though I wasn't disbelieving him, seriously, I'm serious. He goes, we were running downstairs one at a time to the bathroom to whack off. Can you fucking imagine? He says, not for fun, for the spell. I mean, the pleasure was part of it, the rites, the connection to the body, the fluids, but it's exhausting. We were almost certainly dehydrated. We hadn't eaten a proper meal since the cafeteria closed for break. Just had like chips and ho-hos and shit lying around, and that ran out real fast. I guess you can imagine my face as he's telling me this, but I'm trying to hold it together. When he told me he was weird, I'd assumed he was going to tell me about, I don't know, his LAN parties or something. I asked him, I said, "What were you even trying to do?" He said, "Summon an entity." I said, "An entity?" I said, "Like a demon?" And he sort of shrugged and waved his hands, but wouldn't actually come out and say it. I said, "For what?" He said the idea was that it would serve us, basically. I said, "You were going to control a demon like a pet? Were you going to put it on a leash?" He said, "Well, that's the point of all the stuff we were doing up there, cleansing and consecrating the garments, the incense. It's not something to take lightly." Then he sighed really deeply. I said that I understood, but I don't know if he believed me. Everett brewed this tea for himself, he said, some herbal stuff. It was one of the foulest things I've ever smelled, even all the way from the kitchen to up here. He said that he could still smell it in his mind, sitting there. But he gulped it down, he says. It made him pretty calm and a little bit sleepy, so he was sort of half-conscious while he was lying there for the ritual. I had to ask what he meant. I had a feeling that I didn't really want to know. The air was hot and stagnant and hard to breathe. The darkness was getting to me. He said that they stripped their friend down to his underwear and then bound his wrists and ankles so that his body was stretched across their pentagram. They had this massive, ornate ceremonial dagger. It was Everett's. Lord knows where he found it. And they needed to make a blood sacrifice, an offering, to entice the demon, I guess. Fluids, right? Like they were fishing. He said, "Me and Cole each kept one hand on the handle. We started out right beneath Everett's chest, like where his sternum ended, you know, that little divot at the top of the belly. We pressed down, barely at first. I think we were both scared to go any harder. But nothing happened until we actually gave it a little bit of muscle. And then we drew a drop of blood, which was what we were looking for. So we slowly dragged the point down toward his belly button, making this thin red line. There was something about seeing his belly moving beneath the blade," he said. His breathing got irregular, and I swear Matt had this look in his eye. I'll never forget it, you know? He can lie with words till the cows come home, but the look he had, the way his voice sounded almost giddy when he spoke about it. It was all right there, whatever those feelings were. It was if the darkness made it that much easier to transport himself back to that moment in time. He was already in the space. He said, "We took it down to the top of his pelvic bone." He was making funny expressions on his face, writhing a little bit, like it clearly hurt, but it didn't look like pure pain to me. There was something else mingled in with it. I remember that Cole and I looked at each other then. We didn't say anything, but we didn't have to. It was all there in our eyes. And I don't know exactly what it was. I don't even know if there's a word to describe if we'd tried. But it was mutual. I promise you that. And I've thought about it a lot. Trust me, I've replayed it over in my mind, over and over and over. I guess someone must have had to go first, but I don't think either of us could honestly tell you who it was, or if there was some sort of Ouija board effect going on. The point is that we both did it, right to the end. Neither one of us hesitated or egged the other one on for a second. I don't know what exactly was going through my mind then, he said. His hands were sweaty. Unless I could get back into that state of mind, I don't know if I could ever really feel it again or hope to explain it, even to my normal self, let alone someone else. Maybe something like, if a little trickle of blood is enough to draw a sniff from this thing, metaphorically, or whatever, then maybe more, maybe a whole life. I mean, we've come this far, we've worked this hard, sacrificed this much. And isn't this what he would really want deep down? Maybe we have to prove we're serious. I remember thinking that, he said. At least for a flash of a second. I don't even know if you'd call it a process, but it was also just, what would it feel like? What does it feel like? That was when he finally looked up and looked me in the eye for the first time in minutes. God. That was definitely a part of it, he said. I can't deny that. What did you do? I said. And I think I must have been starting to cry by that point, or at least tear up. My voice gets shaky and my eyes start to well up against my will when I get too nervous or scared. I let go of his hands. He took another deep sigh and settled into himself. His face looked almost content. That's the only way I could describe it. We drilled deeper, he said. He looked up at me again, snapped out of his fucking reverie, and said it's unlike anything. What did he do? I said. He shrugged and sucked air through his teeth. He started to thrash around a little bit eventually, he said, but he was pretty out of it. And by that point, we were committed. Eventually, he just sort of faded away. I didn't ask him anything else. I couldn't ask him anything else. It seemed like he wanted me to. I didn't want to know anything he might tell me. I wanted to ask him if he was joking. I wanted to demand that he admit it and tell him it was not funny, but I couldn't. He was waiting for me to ask him how it felt, but I wouldn't. I didn't want to know. If I let him tell me, then the spell would be complete. We would be back in 2013, the candles would be lit. I could have asked any of his friends from the wedding about Everett Ratliff, 19, disappeared from his dorm over spring break and was never seen again. I have their numbers now, but I didn't. That sort of thing would have run in the papers for months. You're free to look it up. I don't need to. There's some things folks are better off not knowing, I think. I've always thought that. Not that I don't know what I know, and that's enough. Plenty. Because you can't unknow a thing, you know? But before I could leave, he said, "Don't you want to know?" I said, "Know what?" He said if it worked. I didn't bother to answer, or rather, I answered by going downstairs and back into the bedroom. The party sounded very far away, farther than ever. Nobody would hear me if I screamed, or they'd think I was drunk. I waited at the attic door for him to come down for what felt like a long time, which was fine because my heart was still racing. I'd expected to feel his hand on my shoulder when I turned around, his strong hand gripping me, holding me there. I used to wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, he said. I could barely hear him. And I'd hear footsteps up here, pacing back and forth, all night, back and forth. Once they started, they wouldn't stop. Only just long enough to drive you crazy when it started right back up again. Eventually, it was happening every few weeks until I moved out. He finally appeared at the bottom of the attic stairs. I never tried anything magical again after that, he said. It was my boyfriend again, the man I'd known, the one I'd decided to marry. The difference was remarkable, truly. Everything about his face looked basically the same, but I was overcome by the feeling that there was some third person we'd left up there. So we just drove back to the hotel. Well, we stopped at McDonald's on the way, but you get the point. I lay beside him all night listening to his breathing until I fell asleep. And then we woke up and the sun was out and we just kept on living. What else was there to do? Until you can't anymore, I guess. Until now. Then that bubble bursts. It bursts and forces you to stop. Makes it so you can't just keep going. Makes it so you have to finally look around and make a choice, or you can't move forward any farther. Shoot, if you buy me one more drink, it might just be the one to do it. It's close. I can feel it. One more to burst the bubble once and for all, and I'll tell you what I really think. Because I'll tell you what, if I could go back to that attic and ask him one question now, I think what I'd really want to know is, why are you telling me this? You want to know what I think? I think that he thinks in his little mind that all of that, the ceremony, the Latin, the invocations, the incantations, gave him me. I know. Could you imagine? Me, an angel, hell sent. But you know what's even worse? Some days, not every day, but many days. And I couldn't tell you why exactly, but I kind of think he's right. Where was that other drink now?